Another big week for the You Killed It podcast, Sheldon. This is true. Before we get down to the latest episode of Champs vs. Stars, I believe some introductions are in order. I'm John Chidley Hill.
And my name is Sheldon Alexander.
And this is You Killed It, the podcast about the challenge. Once again, we're doing a double episode week. For those of you who have not heard yet, we had Casper Smart on, I guess, we recorded on late Monday night, but I published it Tuesday morning. And now it's Wednesday morning, and we're coming right back at you.
Yeah, so I mean, here's the thing. If you're listening to this podcast, whether you're on SoundCloud, whether you're on iTunes, whether you're on YouTube, wherever you're listening to this, and you're saying, hold on, wait a second. What do you mean you interviewed Casper Smart? Well, let's catch you up a little bit just in what's been going on the past few weeks in the world of You Killed It. You see, Wes came on, which was awesome, right? Wes is our dude.
Yeah, love Wes.
Blessed us with another great interview, another great conversation. And in said interview, he had a lot to say about the one and only Casper Smart. And so not only did Wes have a lot to say about Casper, but then he sent the interview to Casper so Casper could hear it. And then what happened, John?
Then Casper got mad at Wes for the things Wes said, told Wes that he had to come on our podcast so that he could state his case. Wes emailed me with Casper's contact information. I reached out to Casper. We hashed out the details. We got him on the podcast. And it was great. He brought a lot of insight. And, you know, that was the sixth person we have interviewed on this show. The previous five are all hardcore challengers, right? Like, they've been on multiple seasons of the challenge. Wes is obviously the most hardcore, but Emily too has done, I think, 6 or 7. Yeah. But Casper was our first star, and you know, to him, and I don't think he would mean this in a disrespectful way, it's just like a fun like summer camp. Like, it's not his career. It was just an opportunity to raise money for a charity that he was and is very passionate about. So it was really interesting hearing his perspective on how reality TV works, how the usual champ people conducted themselves. And he also has the benefit of low stakes. Like, he doesn't have to worry about hurting their feelings or you know, how this is going to affect his standings in the next challenge house. So it was very eye-opening, and as you and I both said at the end of the last episode, the Casper episode, we liked him a lot more getting to have a conversation with him. He's a cool dude, not as cocky as presented on TV.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me was it adds perspective, right? Like, you gain a better understanding as to why someone acts the way they act, right? And for me, I got a better understanding of the fact that, okay, yeah, he comes off as being cocky, but I feel like, you know, and obviously we talk about it all the time that we work in sports journalism, so maybe that's where this comes from, but I'm going to make a parallel here, and obviously I'm talking about two complete different worlds, but the sports parallel is Kobe Bryant right now is fighting with people about LeBron's legacy and Kobe standing in this whole Mike versus LeBron argument, right? And
yep.
The reason why Kobe is fighting over this, and it seems like he's fighting against other fans, is because Kobe is extremely cocky. But that's what makes Kobe Bryant Kobe Bryant. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not comparing Casper Smart to Kobe Bryant. I'm not comparing the NBA to the challenge. But my point is, when you're coming up in a situation like that and it's a level of competition, you need to have every single edge that you can use, right? Every single little bit of confidence that might turn to cockiness, right? You might need that to gas yourself up in that situation, especially when you're walking into something that you might not know what you're getting into, right? But again, the biggest thing to me, awesome. I just feel that it's awesome to, you know, do this, have this conversation that we have every week as fans, and now like to bring in people who are on the show into it, it's awesome. And again, I encourage people to let us know what you think of these interviews, because at the end of the day, they're conversations that we're having with you guys as well, right? So definitely want the fans to be involved. Let us know what you think. Let us know, if your opinion of Casper changed, what you think of Casper and Wes and their little budding rivalry this year. But yeah, we really want to engage with the people, because at the end of the day, we're just like you guys watching a show and enjoying it. We just record our conversations every week. That's it.
Yeah, we just have the advantage of technology and a platform. And really, other fans could do a podcast as well. And there are other podcasts out there. But speaking of including the fans, I have a mea culpa. I made a mistake in our last episode.
Okay.
That a few fans pointed out, and I'm really sorry. I pointed out these fans tweeted at me, but unfortunately, I have been tweeted at so often in the past week that I have totally lost who tweeted at me. So
that sounded like a real heavy humble brag right there. I'm just saying.
No, it's not. It's that I tweet stupid things and people are into it.
No. It's just super funny. It's like, well, I've just been tweeted at so many times since that I can't really go through all my mentions to find which one it could have possibly been.
Well, see, you're undoing what I'm trying to do, which is to apologize for getting something wrong, which is I said that on the upcoming season of Final Reckoning, I said that Zach and Jenna are paired together as each other's, I guess, rivals. This is essentially a complex season of rivals that we have coming up. But actually, Zach is paired with my girl, Amanda. I love Amanda, and I'm excited to have her back. And Jenna is going to be paired with friend of the show, Jemmy. And I gotta say, I think that's going to be a really good team, Jenna and Jemmy.
Yeah, it's an interesting team for sure. Low-key interesting team. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, so anyway, my apologies for getting that wrong. Onwards and upwards.
And if you tweeted at John before about his mistakes, I need you to tweet at him again and say, put some respect on my name. Remember my name next time I tweet at you with corrections. I'm just egging this on right now.
Oh, you're killing me. One actually was, I believe, Charday YXE, who has tweeted at us in the past 30 minutes. So thanks, Char, for making that easy for me. She was tweeting about how excited she is to watch the YouTube video of us interviewing Casper. So there you go. She is actually going to get to see what we look like in real life. Very exciting, I'm sure.
Apologies ahead of time. I'm sorry.
No apologies. We're a couple of handsome dudes.
I'm apologizing for someone that has to that's actually planning on sitting down and having to look at our two mugs for an hour.
No, it's
too funny.
It's good. I'm just pleased that my condo is clean for when we recorded.
Hey.
So let's talk about last night's episode of The Challenge, which apparently is going to be the second last episode of Champs vs. Stars. That's how it looks.
It appears that way, and it was super interesting. And not to plug our recent interviews with Casper and Wes too much again, I don't mean to do that, but I really think an important part of what Wes was talking about with us was that, he takes on the challenge, pardon the pun, of really helping the producers out with the show, right? And moving along storylines. And he even said this year more than ever, he would talk a lot to the stars and try to help them figure out, hey, all these conversations that you guys are having through text or whatever, we need to play that part in front of the camera as well to help the producers along, to help the show along, to help even just how you're being portrayed on this show. And the way that this episode started, we saw so much of that, right? Like it's all just conversations that are all set up to sort of lay the groundwork for what was going to happen. And especially when there's not that many teams left. We definitely needed this, not only to fill out an episode, but also to, think of the angles, right, of how this was going to go, because you're really getting down to the nitty gritty. We knew that there were only 4 teams left, which basically meant that whoever won, the only way to guarantee yourself into the final was to essentially win, right?
Yep.
So we got a bunch of these conversations, right off the bat.
Yes. I'm glad you pointed that out, because I noticed too that this episode was the most conversation we had to open up an episode, to set the stage, the most strategy talk, and also people that you don't normally see talking, right? Like the Kayla and Drake conversation, which seemed to be super awkward, and Kayla even acknowledged that it was an awkward conversation. Yeah. But it was interesting to see, and I believe that what was going on was that they had all been called to the hotel for some reason. Right? Like maybe they had to film something, although judging by how they were dressed, they didn't. Right? Like they weren't wearing the same outfits that they were later wearing in Deliberation or anything like that. But it was interesting that like when Kayla and Drake were talking, CT and Tony were also there in the background. And I mean, who knows how the timing was, maybe separate nights, but that we saw Louise and Casper having dinner together. Yeah. And then there was the opening scene was Wes speaking with Booby and Drake and Louise, and CT was sitting in the background listening in. Yeah. Like, that we haven't... I mean, both Wes and Casper have told us that there weren't a lot of conversations like that. Right? Like, Casper told us that a lot was done by text. Wes said that because they were in LA, everyone was going home or seeing significant others. Like, a lot of people weren't actually staying in the hotel and, like, putting in the work.
Yeah. And, like, here's the other thing, though, right? Like, here's the other thing. As producers, when you're doing a show like this as well, you kind of have it mapped out. You know how many episodes the season's going to be. So you already have things kind of mapped out. So once you get to this point, when there's only 4 teams left, you kind of have a loose idea of what episode, whatever episode this is going to look like. The second last episode, right? Mm-hmm. You have kind of like a rough outline of, okay, well, we're going to have the final challenge. We'll probably try to stretch out the final challenge so that it ends on that cliffhanger, right? So we have some type of juice heading into the finale, right? But on top of that, we need to figure out how are we going to fill the rest of that. So how can we, what's the drama here that we can build up? And obviously the drama is, can we, dive in a little more into the relationships to see, okay, well, depending on who wins, who's going to pick who's siding with who can this team trust, who can this team not trust, right? And the only way you can really do that is to do exactly what we're talking about, what Wes said, where you have these conversations where, we're seeing people talk game that we haven't really seen talk game before in terms of Drake and Kayla. And they're forced to kind of talk about, well, how much can you trust CT and Tony? Right? And they're forced to answer that question. And it's giving us dialogue, but most importantly, from a production standpoint, it's helping them fill out an episode. Because without it, again, these seasons are very tough and very different in terms of, they're not all living in a house where they're all just hanging out. So some drama just kicks off on its own. You literally need to create the drama, right? And we saw that here. And it's funny because that first conversation with Louise and Wes, right? That was interesting because it was something we talked about with Wes, but I'd also like to get your like extended take on this here, and I also find out from the people what they think. Just the fact that Louise kind of started out as, learning from Wes and trying to figure out the game from Wes, and then now it's kind of flipped where, we get the setup of Louise acknowledging, oh, well, now I've kind of surpassed you, right? Like, I thought that was kind of cool, but also then when you take in how this episode not ended, but who ended up being in the elimination, it kind of flipped because Wes kind of worked his Wes type magic again. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of cool how the episode started and then how the big decision was made, and it was kind of old school Wes working his magic again, no?
Yeah, it was interesting. And I think the thing is that Louise, I really like Louise, and I know you like Louise. I think in that conversation she was giving herself too much credit. Because the difference between Season 1 Louise and Season 2 Louise, there's two big differences. The first is that in Season 1, part of the Stars' problem was that... I guess her first season was Champs versus Pros. But part of their problem was that it was truly Champs versus Pro. And there were two separate teams. And most of the pros, right off the hop, disliked each other. Like, she and Lolo Jones are actually competitors at the Olympics and just picked up right where they left off. Whereas the champs, generally speaking, I don't want to say got along, but have a working relationship, right? Like, that season we had Wes and Johnny, and there's no love lost, but they can coexist, especially when they have the advantage of living in a hotel and being able to call loved ones and being able to, like, do their own thing, and if they annoy each other, get some space. So I would say I think that Louise has always had this in her. Like, let's not forget, remember how Louise in Champs vs. Pros fixed the vote so that Lolo would go in? Was it Lolo?
Yeah. No, I definitely remember that. Yeah.
But she fixed the vote. She rigged
the oranges or whatever it was. The limes, I think it was.
Yeah, she rigged the oranges. So, you know, that, like, she's always had this in her. What's changed is that this season she was in a position where it was a totally different game, and also she had her eyes open to how the champs work, right? Like the two previous seasons, people, whether they're pros or stars coming into the show, have been naive to the way of the champs and been naive to the way of how the challenge works. Louise, her great advantage was that she wasn't naive. So I wouldn't say that she has... what's the saying? She learned everything she knows from Wes, but he didn't necessarily teach her everything he knows.
That's interesting.
And I think we saw that in this episode. But let's talk about the competition. I think it's a classic example of Louise and Casper being smart, but still not quite at the level of Wes and even Kayla. Yeah. So the competition was, I guess, simple. They had giant wooden crates, and one of the partners had to be standing on top of the crate, and the other partner had to roll it down this beach. And then once they got to the finish line, they had to unscrew one side of the crate, open it up, and inside they found tiles to do a pop culture crossword. And it wasn't so much a pop culture crossword as it was modern slang crossword. But
yes, or
still,
as I like to say, I guess Urban Dictionary or Black Twitter slang.
Yeah,
it was funny, and I'm going to go on a little tangent here, but it was funny. I was having a conversation with someone recently about what happened. What was it? Oh, do you know what it was? It was the night of the, remember that one night where it was Roseanne show got canceled?
Oh, yeah.
Pusha T responded to Drake, and there's one other thing that all happened on the same night. Oh, the Brian Colangelo burner tweets all happened.
Yeah.
That was like an amazing night on Twitter. And I remember I tweeted something out, and I was like, oh, man, this is amazing. Black Twitter is hilarious. And someone responded to me, or they sent me a text. One of my friends sent me a text, and they're like, what's this Black Twitter? Like, what do you keep talking about Black Twitter?
Man.
And my response was, Black Twitter is why you see mainstream media say things on TV like lit.
Yeah.
Or shade, right? Like those things would not be said. Like those are not things that are in these people's regular vocabulary, but they see it on Twitter, and now it's in the mainstream media. So that to me was kind of like this, what this puzzle was, right? There was like shade, thirsty, like all these things, right? That like they're not in people's regular vocabulary, and I know it gets brushed off as being like cool or hip, but no, that's Black Twitter. But anyways, sorry.
So they had to put these tiles up, and it was great because I guess CT and Tony opened theirs up first. Then it was Casper and Louise. Then it was Wes.
Don't skip too far ahead though here, because the rolling of these crates down the beach, I'm watching it and I'm thinking this looks super hard, and it also was interesting to me because Drake really struggled, right?
Yep.
And then he switched with Kayla. Kayla did a much better job. But Casper and Louise had it really cooking. They had it going on a little routine there, but obviously Louise is a lot lighter than, let's say, Tony. And when you watch those two teams beside each other, it was interesting to see the fact that, like, Tony was really taking a beating because he was trying to, like, run and kind of, like, jump as CT would push it, but he's like landing so awkwardly on the top of the box, whereas Louise was like on top but like gracefully kind of crawling along with the box as Casper was rolling it, right? I thought that part was super interesting, and because Casper and Louise got out to such a huge lead and then kind of squandered it.
Well, I have 2 points to make on that. First is that this challenge to me was a lot like the elimination challenge that Louise and Casper had to do to break the flip cup to eliminate Jose and Salida, where it's about one person has to get the momentum going, but the person either in the cup or on top of the box, they have to shift their weight around too to make it easier, right? And I think that was in part Drake and Kayla's issue, was that I don't think she was very good at shifting her weight around, or maybe she's too light. I'm not sure. But the other thing is Tony is notoriously clumsy. Like that's always what's been said about him. So I can imagine that it would be a struggle for him because it takes such timing and coordination. And also, let's not sleep on the fact Louise is a world-class athlete. And
Facts.
Tony, I think, has gotten into great shape, but that doesn't make him a world-class athlete. There are
definitely true.
I am sure that Tony could bench press more than Louise. I'm sure he could deadlift more than Louise. But that's because he's bigger and heavier. But that doesn't make up for agility or there's world-class athletes are exceptional at, like, what makes you a world-class athlete is small movements, the control that you have over your body. So Louise was just showing that she knows how to shift her weight around while keeping one leg extended, right? And Tony just doesn't have that. I have a question for you, though, when it comes to flipping these boxes. Who do you think is a heavier person, Kayla or Drake? Because Casper threw out the number 145 pounds for Drake's weight. I don't know if that's true, but I have the sense that Kayla is taller than Drake, but she's obviously leaner than him. And, like, we've seen Drake with his shirt off. Like, he's pretty built. Like, he's got big pecs. He's got very defined abs. So I was curious. Like, Kayla got that box moving when they switched and Drake was on top. So
I don't really think it had anything to do with, like, who's heavier. I think it's more so, like, who was stronger.
Yeah.
And if you go back to the Casper interview again, another part that he was talking about, like, his workout plan, whatever, right? And it goes both ways between males and females, but you have people who work out and who are in shape, but they're in shape to take pictures on Instagram, right? And then there are people who are workout and they're in shape so they can actually, like, they're actually strong and can do things. And I think we kind of saw that with Kayla and Drake, because I don't think it's a matter of one being that much heavier than the other. I think it was more like once one of them figured out the strategy more so, right? Like, or even just the will, And I know that sounds like some cheesy Zen type, like, oh, don't give up, your will to win, right? But I don't really think there was that much of a difference. Like, Drake just kind of, like, mentally could tell that he kind of gave up, right?
Yep.
Whereas Kayla was kind of just like, screw this, I gotta do this, and then there was no other option. Like, she kind of had to do it after that, right? So they're coming at it from different standpoints, but I don't know, I could be wrong.
What did Wes say? Never put yourself in a position where you have to rely on a child star?
That's pretty solid advice.
It was. Good life advice. Don't rely on the Macaulay Culkins of this world. Sorry?
You know what? No. I was going to say, you know what it creepily made me think of? Do you watch Atlanta?
Yeah.
That episode with Teddy Perkins.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why that was when he said that. I don't know why that's the thing that popped into my mind. But I feel like I'm just like emotionally scarred from that episode from here on out. Like I can no longer think of like child stars or like Michael Jackson or anything like that without thinking of that episode of Atlanta with Teddy Perkins. Apologies for those listening that have no idea what I'm talking about, but just Google Teddy Perkins.
Well, and just watch Atlanta. Like, what are you doing with your life? If you haven't seen Atlanta, you need to get on that. It's arguably the best show on TV right now. But I digress.
Also true.
I wanted to talk about the crosswords and how I thought that it was a smart strategy by Louise and Casper to lay their crossword out on the sand so that other people couldn't look at it. Yeah. Unfortunately, apparently they couldn't back that up with, as you said, Black Twitter slang. But I love that Wes and Kayla were just straight up looking at other people's boards, which is smart. That's what I'm going to be honest. That's what I would do. Like, to me, that's an automatic.
Smarter, not harder.
Yep. I'm with Kayla exactly. So CT and Tony, although they got their boxes in second, they got their box across the line second. They were second. They were the ones that won. They were the power team, and they do this bizarre dad tribal dance. How would you describe it? Was that supposed to be like a football touchdown dance?
I have no words, actually, and I know that makes no sense because obviously doing a podcast about a television show means that by definition I should have words to describe that, but I don't, because that was just odd. Is what I'm gonna go with.
I liked
that was weird.
I liked in Confessional that they had a celebration where they like slap their bellies and then grunt. I liked the coordination on that.
Kind of resembled the All Blacks in rugby.
More like the All Fats.
Oh, I see what you did there. But
so then it all comes down to the political game. Wes's time to shine, where Kayla and Wes are both making their cases, and it's interesting because they're in a very similar boat where Kayla and Tony are super tight. IRL, in real life, they are tight. And Wes and CT are also tight and good buddies. And in real life, Wes was talking about how he has a small wedding coming up, and that like CT's right on that bubble on whether or not he should be coming. So I do have to point this out because I've pointed it out in the past. One of the issues at play, one of the disadvantages that Wes has on this show is that Tony and CT and Kayla are all on Final Reckoning. So they would never say this on Chance vs. Stars, although their friendships are real. Like Tony and Kayla's friendship is real, and Wes and CT's friendship is real. All Tony has to say to CT is, "Hey man, if we keep Kayla alive, she'll owe you when it comes to the Final Reckoning."
Yep.
Right. Like this is, and like I've made this point before. Wes has made this point much further back on our show, but that's a real issue, and it's a card that Wes doesn't have in his hand to play.
For sure.
What did you think about the cases being made for either keeping Drake and Kayla or Booby, and Wes. It goes without saying that everyone was going to put Casper and Louise in. Like, that was not even up for debate. But what did you think of the two teams and the conflict that CT and Tony had to navigate?
So, to me, once again, and I know I've done this a lot during this season, but again, I'm going to tip my cap to the producers and editors of the show and the way that they plotted this whole thing. Because not only, we can give credit to Wes, and Wes did a great job in masterminding this whole thing so that he wasn't the one going in. But the way that they edited this whole episode together to focus in on, okay, well, who are CT going to put in, right? Who are CT and Tony going to put in? And making that the focal point of like all the discussions, all of the debates going forward, when really it was just not, if not more important for you and one of the other teams that lost to get in cahoots and automatically vote in another team. That was clearly the more important thing to do. So when Kayla and Wes met up early on, when they're sitting in the tree or whatever, right? I'm sure they probably did discuss this, but I'm also sure that it wasn't shown on purpose. But why wouldn't they be sitting there saying, hey, let's make sure we throw in Casper and Louise. Let's make that vote. Like, to me, that's the thing that you can control because you actually have a vote. So instead of relying on whatever CT and Tony might do, because obviously you know that they're conflicted, what do we always say? Worry about what you can control. Yep. And the thing that you can control is you having a vote on who else is going to go in. And, hey, again, great storytelling by the producers and the editors who put together this show, but I mean, Wes taking it old school, Wes just out-gaming, out-maneuvering everyone else, going to Casper and saying, hey, we don't know what CT's going to do, but let's figure out and make sure that we're on the same page, and we're going to put in Drake and Kayla. That was a genius part of this whole episode. And again, we got the setup from early that Louise thinks that she's taken over the mantle from Wes. But when it comes down to the come down, Wes out-theoried this whole game already.
Yeah. And I was trying to get to this a little bit earlier in our conversation, but something that Louise doesn't seem to be recognizing is that what she had to do on this entire season, which she did a great job on, which she executed on, was that all she had to do was form an alliance and hold it together. That was her strategy. That's what it boiled down to.
And it worked.
What Wes basically was fighting from underneath the entire season, where Wes was outnumbered and outgunned. Essentially, his only ally on blue team was Tony, and they had to survive and keep like rocking and rolling and find a way to live another day, day by day. Even the Miz commented to Wes, like, man, you have been on pins and needles all season. Like, you seem stressed out. And Wes very intelligently said, I am stressed because I don't know what the twist is going to be. I don't know what the power play is going to be. Which is exactly right. Like, Wes, more than anyone this season, seems to recognize that there's always something else coming down the pike. And, like, I think it stressed him out that he always knows that there's going to be another shoe to drop. But at least he recognizes that there's another shoe that's going to drop.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And it was definitely a thing where, the way that this all played out, and even going back to the actual challenge, right?
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned Casper and Louise, and they had a pretty good strategy. And I thought that it was a good strategy. Problem is they probably hung on to it for a little too long. And I don't know whether it was editing. Like, I don't know how close it ended up being in terms of when CT and Tony finished in comparison to when Casper and Louise finished. I mean, obviously they edited it together so that it looked like it was close. But if it was that close, to me, that means the difference was the time that they had to spend putting all the pieces up instead of just having the pieces up already while you're trying to finish. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think they wasted too much time on that. And that, to me, was exactly what you said, doubling down on what you said in terms of, all right, here's my theory, here's my game strategy, but Kayla's been here before, and she knows, okay, I can save time by just copying. Wes has been here before. He knows I can save time on these puzzles by copying. And it was kind of interesting to see that play out. And I wonder if at some point they try to come up with a way to stop the copying or stop the cheating, so that, I don't know if different people, like if you can make the board different so that you're looking at someone else's board, but it's not the same as yours. Like, is that the way to sort of counter that? I don't know. Or do we like the fact that people can just openly cheat and use that advantage if they want?
I like it, and I'll tell you why. I like it when they do it on the regular challenge, and I like it when they do it on Champs vs. Stars, because it's an opportunity to show the character of the people involved, right?
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
It's an opportunity to see, like, is this person ruthless? Is this person cunning? Is this person willing to go to great lengths? Or are they pure of heart? Are they virtuous? And like, I agree with you that Louise and Casper stuck with their strategy too long. They probably should have taken a glance at their neighbors and put up the same words that had already been put up, right? Like, that's the solution. If you don't want to get your ideas stolen, just make sure that you don't put up the answers that they're looking for. Mm-hmm. That's the answer.
No, definitely.
But to their credit, they, not that they won, but they could say that, like, Louise and Casper played fairly in that game, right? They didn't cheat. And that is a credit to their character.
There was a point where they were looking. There was a point, for sure. I remember The Miz saying it and acknowledging that there was a point towards the end where Casper and Louise were peeking over at someone. I think it was, who was right beside them? It was Wes's team, right?
Yeah, it was Wes.
I'm pretty sure there definitely was a moment, because I wrote that part down, because I was trying to figure out too, like, wait, did everyone just give up and start cheating at a certain point? And yes, even Casper and Louise did give a little look over to the other side.
Okay.
But at the same time, I mean, it was a great challenge, I thought. I thought it was a pretty cool challenge. It was very interesting. I wish they would have, for maybe the non-Twitter users, the non-people that are familiar with, this internet culture of lingo that has become commonplace, right? No, seriously though, right? Like, I think it's pretty funny now in this era that words like salty or woke, or I guess woke is a different thing, because woke really became like super, super mainstream, and then like, there became like a counter woke culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the term woke ended up being used so much, right? But like, even words that already existed but now are given a different meaning, like basic. Or not that basic's given a different meaning, but you know what I mean? Like, what it means isn't what it used to mean, if that makes more sense, right? Or shady, or thirsty, or I'm trying to think of what other words they used. They had like salty,
savage,
right? And it's just like, all these things I thought was just funny, and I thought it would have been funnier if they actually highlighted a little more of what the words were, or like maybe if it was like a trivia thing for this, right? That maybe that might have been a lot more fun, or taken up more time.
That's what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be more like, they described it as pop culture, but it was really slang. I thought it was going to be like legit pop culture. Like, I mean, they would have filmed this before that, but like, who is Drake beefing with right now?
Yeah.
Right? Or like, who did Nick Young, what Australian rapper did Nick Young cheat on? Or like, I mean, one near and dear to Booby's heart, who did Tristan Thompson cheat on? Like stuff like that. Like, I thought it'd be like gossip.
No, for sure. No, I got you.
But we should talk about
lingo.
We should talk about how Wes made his power move, because I don't think maybe it was that it wasn't really given to them in the confessionals, but I didn't think that the producers, the editors, did the best job of explaining Wes's move. So I would like to take a run at it, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So what it turns out that what happens is that before CT and Tony choose between the two of them who's going to be the MVP, the three losing teams vote amongst themselves as to which team was the least valuable. And whoever's least valuable is going into elimination, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the first team to vote is Casper and Louise, and they vote for Kayla and Drake.
Yes.
Kayla and Drake basically say, well, right back at you, and vote for Casper and Louise. This was the crucial mistake. Because what they should have done was vote for Wes and Booby.
Exactly.
Because then Wes and Booby would vote for Kayla and Drake, or would either vote for, could vote for either team, really. I guess the better move would be if they want...
They'd be more likely to tie it up.
Yeah. They'd be more likely to tie it up because then it goes to some sort of vote-breaking mechanism. Or, and that vote-breaking mechanism would likely be who won the last elimination, or it would fall to CT and Tony, who would put in Louise and Casper. The problem with Kayla's thinking was that by voting for Louise and Casper are already going to go in if you leave it to CT and Tony. Like, CT and Tony don't want to vote for Wes and Booby. They don't want to vote for Kayla and Drake because they like both of those teams and they're legitimately torn between them. So what you want to do is you want to make it so that CT and Tony, their only choice, or like you have to make it so that Louise and Casper are a choice for them because then they'll take that choice. So Wes, full credit to him, very quickly recognized the situation. And when Kayla tied it between her and Casper and Louise, it was automatic for Wes to vote for Kayla and Drake because that puts them in. And given the choice between voting for Wes and Booby or Drake and Louise, CT and Tony are going to vote in Casper and Louise 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, I know Kayla was salty about it, but it's also her own fault.
It's tough, though, right? Because if Kayla... So let's play this out, right? And let's say that, okay, Casper and Louise say they're voting for Kayla and Drake, right?
Yeah.
So then if Kayla and Drake say, well, we're going to vote for Wes and... why am I drawing a blank? Wes and Booby, right?
Yeah.
Then it's 1-1, and then Wes and at that point, who's Wes going to vote for? He still votes for Kayla and Thing, and they're automatically going in, no?
Yeah, because it protects
that's still
him.
Two.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, either way, it was the foolproof plan was getting on the side of one of the other people, right? That was a genius play of Wes. And so Kayla was so focused on being in cahoots with Tony that she didn't think of the other side, right?
Yep.
And the other side was really the smarter play. Because if she was smart enough to say, hey, Wes, we can make Casper, if we just figure out that Casper and Louise are going in automatically, let's us make a deal so that we both say Casper and Louise, and then we can trust whose relationship is stronger with Tony and CT. That would have been Kayla's best play.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
but I don't know. It was interesting though, and I think that I would love to, and I don't know, maybe we'll shoot Wes a message on like Twitter or something to be like, did you like what that full conversation was? Like, what parts did we not see of the whole politic game, or was this his whole plan the entire time? That's what I really want to know. What was his plan the entire time? Was this his plan the entire time? Sorry. Or were there other things that we didn't see, right? Like, at what point did he figure out, oh, wait a second, if me and Casper automatically put in Kayla and Drake, then that automatically saves me. But I'm also pretty sure that Louise and Casper would rather go against Kayla and Drake than go against Booby and Wes. Right? So like it almost worked the exact same way as the last elimination where Louise and Casper went in and they'd rather go in against Jose and Salida as opposed to going in against Tony and CT. Right? So we're almost in the same situation where, you know, you have these two teams figuring it out and it's either, okay, if I'm going to go into the elimination, I'd rather go in against a weaker team.
Yeah, it makes sense. Let's talk about the elimination itself, because it was crazy and weird. So both teams have sort of a panel, and each partner has to stand on either side of the panel. And pretty high up, I'd say about 7 feet up, maybe. There's a button on each.
You had to jump.
Yeah, you had to jump. You had to earn it. And each team was responsible for tapping the button 1,000 times. 1,000 times. And when
I need to know if it was legit 1,000 times.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was.
It seemed super interesting, but I would love to know that.
And
the reason I ask too, and I probably shouldn't say this because this is too like TV nerd, but I was spending a lot of the time trying to figure out if the numbers in the television screens were added in post-production, and I think they were.
Oh.
But like that's what I spent most of the time trying to pay attention to, because I was like, really, they're gonna make them jump 1,000 times and tap the button 1,000 times? Like that seems like a lot. And obviously you could get a counter that would do it for you, but as I saw the screen, I kept wondering, I'm like, is that Photoshop? That looked like it was added in post in After Effects or something. Like the numbers in the screen were added afterwards. That's what my focus was on, and I probably shouldn't say that because that would be giving away too much. But again, I don't know. This is me assuming and wondering and being too much of a loser thinking about things that really don't matter in the grand scheme of it, you know?
Well, the first thing that I wondered about was, do you have to how can I phrase this? Do you have to jump? Like, is it one tap per jump? Or in theory, could you jump and like quickly tap it twice? Because the hard part is the jumping, not the tapping. Right? Like that's what's going to kill you. So like in theory, could you jump fewer times but tap twice? Because I mean, what they're looking for is for each person to tap it 500 times. But if you can reduce your number of jumps, that's a huge advantage because you're going to like get less tired. As Louise said, she was out of air and she was worried about lactic acid buildup in Casper's legs. And like those two know what they're talking about when it comes to like the results of fatigue. So I was just curious to know like what exactly was the expectation there. And like I always wonder because I know I've heard interviews with TJ Lavin, and he says that one of the things you don't see when they film is that when they explain the rules, there's at least like a 20 to 30 minute period afterwards where the competitors ask questions.
Yeah.
Right? And like part of, in my mind, I would want to know, like, could I double tap? But I also wouldn't want to loudly say it because I wouldn't want the other team to emulate that, right? Like, I wouldn't want them to copy what I'm doing. So it'd be I
don't see why you wouldn't be allowed to, actually.
Yeah, I think it's fair. And, like, if they realize you're doing it, like, why... Like, they are equally entitled to do it. Like, it's not a huge competitive advantage, but in any event, after they tap these buttons 1,000 times, a block of ice will fall and smash another block of ice, and in each block of ice there is a set of clothing, like pants, shirt, that's frozen in the block of ice. They have to get the clothing out of the ice, like pull it apart, and then wear it, and then tap the buttons another 1,000 times.
Yes. Yeah. So a very interesting twist, and one of those things that I really wonder, how did someone come up with this?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
what kind of
that is an
sicko designed
interesting
this?
Yeah. Like, that's super cool, right? Like, just like, what will they possibly think of next in terms of, okay, so jumping up and down is one thing, having to like break open the ice is another thing, but no, there's going to be clothes that's frozen in there, and now you have to wear said clothes. But not only like breaking up the clothes, right?
Yeah,
That's frozen, and being able to put on frozen clothes is another thing. But then on top of that, now you're wearing the cold clothes while now going back to having to jump and tap another 1,000 times.
You know what the
I
problem?
don't know who came up to that, but I hope that person got a raise. Hat
You know
tip
what?
to that person, whoever came up with that.
You know what the problem's going to be, right? By
No.
the time they pull the clothing apart and put the clothing on, they're super warm from all that jumping, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at first they'll be nice because the clothing will be cold, but then it's just going to be wet.
Yeah,
So now they're jumping in wet, heavy clothing. That's going to be way worse. It's going to be way more difficult to jump up and down in wet clothing, because wet clothing, depending on your size, could add like an extra 5 or 10 pounds.
yeah. No, definitely.
Like, that's going to be brutal.
Yeah. Oh, no. It definitely would be super hard. And you're also going to be a lot more tired. Yeah, I just found it super interesting. An interesting challenge for sure. I want to know how they counted. I hope someone can, like, tweet us the information or something, because I'm super interested in that angle of it. But it was a super cool challenge again. I thought it was pretty cool. I liked it. And especially on this show where they have to be a little more creative with how they do these challenges, because again, you're dealing with people that have other careers, so there's certain things they can and can't do. But yeah, it's interesting to come up with things that are creative enough and that like are engaging enough to an audience. And I actually liked that. I thought it was cool. I was in on that challenge for sure. Now, we don't know who's going to win,
No.
right? Like, that's a nice little cliffhanger heading into the next episode. But I will say this. I smell a blowout by Casper and Louise, and there was just like some creative editing to make it look closer than it actually was.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I'm going the opposite way. I'll tell you why. When they were showing when they were explaining it, you know how they'll have like super zoomed in, like cuts of the action.
Yep.
The only person we saw pulling on clothing was Drake, and all we saw of Louise and Casper was sitting there pulling at the clothing.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair.
And maybe you're right. Maybe that's just like good editing, and they know that fans are like looking for that sort of thing. But to me, that is significant. That the only person we saw actually pulling on the clothing was Drake. So I mean,
definitely fair, definitely interesting, and I honestly cannot wait to see how it plays out, because I'm pleasantly surprised by this season. I thought it was a really good season, and so I'm interested to see how it wraps up. I love that we don't know who's going to win, right? Like, it could be any of these teams. I mean, we don't think that Drake and Kayla can win, but do you know what I mean? Like, it's still a pretty wide open competition in terms of who can win. And yeah, I've enjoyed the season a lot more than I thought I would, for sure.
You know, when Wes pulled that, I don't want to say fast one, because it was just good strategy. Like, I don't think he wasn't dishonest in what he did. He was just presented an opportunity and he took it. And he made no promises to Kayla. Like, they knew that they were in competition with each other. He said that he hopes Kayla learns from this. And I'm interested to see, because I feel like it's almost like summer school, you know? Like, the courses aren't as hard, but having the discipline is helpful for your long-term development. And I wonder if being on this season helps Kayla perform better in the regular challenge. Because, like, we're talking so much about, like, what Louise has learned and what Casper has learned from Wes. Mm-hmm. But let's not forget, there are some people like on this season of Champs versus Stars who are challengers who don't have a ton of experience, like Tori, like Kayla, and they could be learning too. And not just from Wes, but from Shane and from CT, and, you know, not that Devon's had their success, but, like, I think that there's something to be said for if you're a champ going on the show and you're still learning about things, right? Like, it's sort of like practice.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I got you.
So tell me, Sheldon, who killed it for you this week?
I think we've talked about it a lot, and it's kind of funny how this played out. And obviously, at the time of the interview, we have no idea what's coming up in the season at all, and it's not like they tell us for obvious reasons because they can't discuss it during an interview or they can't share it. But Wes, man, Wes is definitely the MVP of this episode because I think you said it best, right? This whole season has been a struggle for Wes where he was kind of like fighting for his place. Like he was kind of like, you know, he never had the majority on his side really. He was kind of jokingly, but also there's some reality to him playing it up that he was like the captive of the stars on the blue team, you know? And like Wes has been kind of like playing, like he's been fighting and scratching and clawing to stay in the game the whole season. And so to get to this point where it's the finals are on the line and he makes a big time maneuver to, you know, outwit his way into the finale, classic Wes, great job. And I just think that it was one of those, if you hear us talk about Wes sometimes or you've only seen Wes on the challenge in this, you know, entity of the challenge, or you might not be that familiar with all of his work, I think this was a pretty good, you know, resume boost for Wes here because he probably should have been out of this season from, I don't know, one of the early weeks for sure, right? The way that he was playing the game, the way that he was going at, you know, Casper and Louise, but the way that he maintained and stuck around, Wes is definitely my MVP.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. It's unanimous. I mean, a few weeks ago, I made him my MVP because he made it to the pairs segment, but now he's made it to the final.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not going to cheap out on my man. He still deserves full marks for this, right? Like, this is an impressive showing. Obviously, all eyes now. We have one more episode. Of Champs vs. Stars. Then it seems like we're going to have maybe a 2 or 3 week break, and then it's Final Reckoning. And we finally got a real peek at what Final Reckoning is all about. What did you think of the trailer that dropped last night?
To be honest, I was underwhelmed.
Me too.
And it was kind of funny because I think it was Amanda. I saw Amanda's tweet earlier in the day. No, sorry. Last night I saw Amanda's tweet while the show was going on. Like, I never end up watching the show live, obviously, just due to commercials, and it's better to fast forward through. But I was still online. I was on Twitter. I was doing some work, and I saw Amanda's tweet, and it was the Britney Spears, like, looking confused, kind of looking around.
Yeah.
Look on her. I'm trying to describe this meme, and I'm struggling to, but it's basically like Britney Spears. I guess she was hosting, or she was on American Idol or whatever, but she's like looking around confused and kind of like, what was that, is kind of the expression, I guess.
Yeah.
And Amanda's caption said, "My reaction to this lame ass trailer."
Yeah.
And I saw that and I thought, okay, I know Amanda is very opinionated. I know that, you know, if something goes against her, she will voice her opinion and hold back no punches. Mm-hmm. So I thought maybe something in the trailer just happened to make her look bad, maybe.
No.
And that's why she thought the trailer was lame. You know, like, I thought that could have been it. But nope, she just spit straight facts.
Yeah, it felt like the cuts were so fast that you couldn't get anything of substance out of them. You know what I mean?
I wonder if they're just still I wonder if they're still in the thick of putting the show together.
Yeah, maybe.
So you don't know yet what you're going to actually end up putting into the show. So you can't put certain things into the trailer yet.
Well, I mean...
Do you know what I mean? Because think about when we watched the last reunions of the last few seasons, right? Like the actual seasons of Vendettas or whatever, right? And they always end up talking about fights or arguments that we never saw. Fights, arguments, hookups, like scenes that when you're hearing about it, you're like, wait a second, how is this not in the show? Wait a second, how is that not in the show, right? And that tells you that there ends up being a lot of things that end up on the cutting room floor because it doesn't fit into the overall narrative of the season or the overall storyline of the season, right? So maybe, and I don't know, I guess maybe the producers, the producers are in my good books for what they've done with revamping Champs versus Pros. So maybe I'm making excuses for them here, but I'm gonna say that maybe they're still in the thick of editing together the actual season, and so there are certain things they didn't want to put in yet. But overall, I was like, yeah, that really didn't make me want to watch the show. Like, I'm already in, right? I'm always gonna watch, of course. But if I was just like the generic MTV viewer or someone who might be into a reality show and I turned that trailer on, I would have been like, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you would know. So let me ask you a question. How long would you say it would take to edit together something like that, right? Because, like, you are responsible for editing together hype packages for a local sports network. How long do you think that would take would it take to put together that video?
That is impossible to know because there's so many different things, like the scale of what this show is, right? And the amount of footage that they have, it's crazy, right? It's crazy to think about. So when you think about how much of the raw footage you have to be ingesting just to put together an episode, but then now to, get all the drama that could end up in the show, but you don't really know. And then we know that there's a lot of pump fakes that happen sometimes when it's, something that we hear and it looks in the trailer like it goes down one way, but then when you see the actual episode, you're like, oh, that wasn't what they made it seem like it at all, right?
Yeah.
You need a lot of time to go through the footage and find all those things and put that all together. And so if we're still, 3 weeks out from the actual first episode, I wouldn't be that shocked if they're still editing the ending of the season right now. Do you know what I mean?
Here's why I ask. Because the big news coming out of Final Reckoning, and this is a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear spoilers,
I don't want to hear spoilers.
You know this one, though. I know you know this one, so I don't feel bad. That is that Cara Maria and Paulie from Big Brother hook up, but he had a girlfriend, Danielle, I forget her last name, from The Bachelor and Bachelor in Paradise. That was nowhere to be seen in that trailer. But that news is what everyone's talking about. So I'm very curious as to why they didn't... Like, the news is already out there, and I was just wondering how fast they could pivot to include that in the trailer. Because that story is encompassing reality TV fans well outside the world of the challenge, right? People who are into The Bachelor, people who are into Big Brother, which are not... they're sort of related products, increasingly so, but they're not exactly the same.
Yeah.
People are talking about that. Like, that's in People magazine. That's in Us Weekly. And The Bachelor and Big Brother are more popular than The Challenge, or maybe more accurately, they're more mainstream than The Challenge. So I was just curious that, like, why didn't they include, tease, hint at? They seem to be focused on people who I would say typically are minor characters. Like, we didn't see Johnny Bananas at all. and he is arguably the main character of the challenge. And if he's not, Cara Maria is, and you barely saw her as well. So
I'm gonna stick with my initial theory though, that I just think they're trying to figure out how much of a storyline this is actually gonna be. Because the other part that we don't know if they have footage of Paulie and Cara Maria. We don't know if there's like footage of said hookup. We don't know if, you know, it was something that came out of the woodworks when they finished filming and they came back, and then everyone's like, wait a second, this guy had a girlfriend? Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't know the context of why this is even in the news, and I'm doing air quotes because by news I mean like TMZ news, right? We don't know any of those details. So it could have been a thing where, you know, maybe they hooked up, maybe they didn't hook up. But the confirmation to, like, you know, who's going at each other right now, it's like Marie and, well, I shouldn't even say they're going at each other because they're kind of like all tiptoeing around it and not really like deep diving into it, right? But I don't know. I just think that maybe we don't know enough, or maybe because it could be anything. They might not even have footage of the hookup, right? So they don't know how to portray it or make it a storyline. It might be one of those things where to get that storyline into the show, John, they need to do confessionals with everyone to get that storyline up and running, right? To make up for a lack of footage that they don't have of Paulie and Cara Maria, right? Like, that could be the interesting part of it too, right? Because we know they might do confessionals as they go along, but then also after the season is done and everyone comes back home, they'll do another round of confessionals because they'll put together an episode and you'll have holes, right? You'll have holes in your timeline in terms of how this story's going to connect, and you need someone to tell that story, and you need to reschedule confessionals with Cara or Paulie or whoever, where basically I need you to tell me, okay, well, what happened after you left the club and then you came back home?
Yeah.
Right? So it could be a bunch of those different things. I don't know. But if there's one thing I do know, it's that the trailers are normally fire.
Yes.
So for it to not be that good, but from all indications, it seems like it's going to be a good season, right?
Yeah.
That tells me that there will be another trailer to come that will do it justice and really get this thing off the ground in terms of the hype machine. Do you know what I mean? Like,
so.
I'm not really worried. The trailer just kind of made me think like, oh, okay, they kind of threw something together to have something air before the challenge. What is this? Champs versus pros or stars? Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if next week in the finale they have another trailer that's even better. I wouldn't be surprised.
I hope so, because like you, I was disappointed in that trailer. We will talk hopefully about this theoretical second trailer next week.
Yes.
If you want to get me on Twitter, I'm at J Chidley Hill, and on Instagram also at J Chidley Hill.
And you can find me on Twitter at Shell Alexander and on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander.
And until next week, this was You Killed It.
You killed it.